Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories about road trips through the Appalachian backroads. By the end, you might develop hodophobia, the fear of travel. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're listening from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start. I was 18 when it happened, somewhere deep into a solo road trip I'd planned for months. Just me, my dad's old Honda, and a vague route cutting south through Appalachia. It was supposed to be one of those cliché find yourself things after high school, and I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. Just time, space, maybe a couple cool overlooks. By the time I crossed into Kentucky, cell signal had started to flicker in and out. Then it dropped completely somewhere past a town that didn't even show up on my GPS. No data, no texts, no Spotify. Just me and whatever songs had already downloaded. The road thinned out into 2-lane blacktop, curling through low hills and thick woods that leaned in like they wanted to keep something hidden. The trees made everything darker, even though the sun was still up. My playlist had looped for the 3rd time, and I'd stopped singing along. I wasn't nervous, just tired. My legs were stiff from the drive, my water bottle was empty, and the gas gauge had nudged down a little more than I liked. When I saw this sun-faded wooden sign nailed to a crooked post, "Gas Food 2 miles," I took the turn without hesitation. The arrow pointed off down a narrow side road that looked like it hadn't seen a snowplow in 5 years. It curved into the trees like a question mark nobody wanted to answer. 2 miles passed, then 3. Still no station. My stomach made that hollow, echoey sound it does when it's not exactly hungry but not okay either. I figured maybe the sign was just old. Maybe it pointed to something that had shut down a while ago. I was about to turn back when the trees cleared enough for me to spot it. The building was small and square, poured concrete with a flat roof and a wide front window that was so smeared it looked frosted. Out front were 2 gas pumps, one of them wrapped in what looked like a garbage bag held down with duct tape. The other had its screen blinking, but the numbers didn't move. There was no sign with a name, no hours posted, no flag, no banner, no sound. Just a black SUV parked right beside the wall, engine off, windows tinted so dark I couldn't even see the dash. 3 guys leaned against the driver's side like they'd grown roots there, not talking, not doing anything, just watching. Something in my gut gave a tug, and yet I still pulled in. Maybe because the tank was low, maybe because I was stupid, or maybe because I didn't want to admit I felt uneasy. As soon as I opened my door, all 3 of them looked at me at the same time. It wasn't casual, it wasn't curious, it was coordinated, like they'd been waiting for that exact moment. One of them stood straighter than the others. He was taller, dressed neater too, like he'd just stepped out of a catalog that didn't sell anything affordable. Hoodie with no wrinkles, jeans that still had creases, sneakers too clean for dirt roads. He gave me a smile that felt practiced, familiar, but not in a comforting way. I nodded politely and walked into the store. The air inside was colder than it should have been. Not air conditioning, more like a space that hadn't had body heat in a while. The ceiling fans hung motionless. One fluorescent bulb blinked in the corner like it was on its last chance. There was no one behind the counter, no bell, no security mirror, just a humming fridge at the back, and metal shelves with snacks that looked like they remembered the Obama administration. I grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of jerky off the shelf without even looking at the price. My plan was simple: buy, pump, leave. Then I heard it, a voice outside the window to my left. Then another, Russian. I froze. Not completely, just enough to look like I was still browsing. Kept my back to the glass, just listened. My mom's Russian. I grew up hearing it at home. I don't speak it fluently, but I understand more than most. Enough to know when people think they can speak freely. She's perfect. one voice said. Another asked, what's the plan once she's off the road? A third answered, we do what we came to do. I stood there, staring through a bottle of water like it had the power to teleport me. My heartbeat thudded through my ears. I didn't let it show. I didn't twitch, didn't look toward the window, just focused on keeping my breathing normal. I walked slowly to the counter, waited a beat, then set the items down like nothing was wrong. Still no clerk, no beeps, no dings, just silence and those voices outside. After a few more seconds, I gave up the act. Walked out. They were standing the same way as before, but more alert now, straighter, still smiling. Hey, the tall one said, you okay? You looked kind of spaced out in there. I smiled back, thin and tired. Yeah, I'm good. Just zoned out a little. Long day. He stepped in closer. Not close enough to touch, but enough that I felt cornered. We were about to head up to this lookout point, he said. Real pretty. There's food too, you should come. I didn't even glance at the others. Just the SUV. Black windows, too clean, too intentional. Sure, I said, as casually as I could. The back passenger door opened like it had been waiting. Not automatic, just perfectly timed. I slid in, trying to keep my shoulders relaxed. The tall one got in beside me, too close again. The others jumped in front. The locks clicked down, smooth, quiet. They started talking again in Russian, lower voices, fewer words, but I caught enough. What if she freaks out? She won't. Not out here. Good, then it's fast. I left my earbuds in, but didn't turn on any music. Just stared out the window. Trees blurred past. No houses, no signs, no anything. Then the one next to me leaned in like we were just sharing secrets. Change of plans, he said. We're heading somewhere more private. That cool? I didn't respond. He asked again, slower. You good with that? I'd rather head back, I said, keeping my tone even. Still got hours to drive. He laughed. Short, dry. Nah, you don't get to change your mind now. From the front, the passenger said. She doesn't even have her phone. I patted my pocket. Empty. The driver reached back, held up my phone like he'd won something. Rolled down the window and flung it into the woods. That's when I grabbed the handle, pulled, locked. The tall one shoved me back hard, arm across my chest, pinning me like I weighed nothing. I twisted, but it didn't matter. He muttered something in Russian, frustrated. Timing, keep it fast. I shut my eyes, started praying under my breath. Not for a miracle, just for anything to stop this. Something. Anything. And then sirens, first distant, then right behind us. Blinding red and blue lit up the inside of the SUV like a warning flare. The driver shouted something, slammed the brakes. We all jerked forward. Outside, 2 sheriff's cruisers, one blocking the road ahead, one behind. The loudspeaker cracked, hands where I could see them. Out of the vehicle, now. The tall guy opened his door slow, like he still thought he had control. I didn't wait. I bolted. Out the door, into the road, arms raised. A deputy met me halfway, pulled me behind his car. I dropped to the pavement, hands still up. I was shaking so hard I couldn't even focus on what anyone was saying. They cuffed the men without resistance. No drama, no shouting, like it wasn't their first time. Wasn't until I was in the back of the cruiser, clutching one of those foil emergency blankets, that someone explained what had happened. A park ranger had passed the gas station a few minutes after I went in. He recognized the SUV, plates flagged from another county for suspected trafficking. He radioed it in, kept his distance, followed until help arrived. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, just a week of quiet drives and weird art stops with my cousins and Aunt Lorna. She'd pulled us out of our usual summer routines for what she called a reset. No schedules, no sports camps, no Wi-Fi, just back roads through the Appalachians in her enormous, wheezing Suburban, navy blue, with more rust than paint on the back bumper, and a CD player that needed a spoon jammed into the slot just to play anything. The smell inside was always this strange combo of pine-scented cleaner and crocheted wool, like the ghosts of every car ride she'd ever taken were still lingering in the seats. We packed the thing with coolers full of pasta salad and sandwich fixings, a bucket of acrylic paints, 3 slightly out-of-tune ukuleles, and a stack of sketch pads so battered you couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. We weren't outdoorsy. Nobody in that car had ever thrown a spiral or cared about step counts. We were more of a scribble in the margin, hum a song you don't remember the words to kind of family. The whole route avoided interstates. Lorna had mapped out what she called the spine of the land, a twisting trail through West Virginia down into eastern Kentucky, made up entirely of scenic byways, roadside museums, forgotten churches, and driveways that had somehow become tourist attractions. Places with hand-painted signs and donation jars nailed to posts. Lots of bottle trees and welded-together sculptures in front yards. She said it was her way of reclaiming space for the stuff nobody funds anymore, stuff like music and color and weirdness. She'd spent years fighting for the arts back home, showing up at school board meetings and trying to explain why it mattered that kids had instruments and paint that wasn't 15 years old. I think that fight exhausted her. Maybe this trip was her way of remembering what it felt like when creativity was something you could actually touch. 3 days in, right after lunch and just before the next planned stop, we saw a sign nailed to a tree. It was crooked and painted in fading red, "Party Scenic Overlook 1 mile ahead, donations welcome." There was a thin gravel road veering off to the right, barely wide enough for the Suburban. It looked like it hadn't seen another car in months, or maybe years. The trees leaned in close, and the road just peeled away from the main one like it didn't care what happened next. Without hesitation, Lorna flicked the blinker and turned. Aaron, my cousin in the front seat, shot her a sideways glance. "This feels like a horror movie setup." "We won't stay long," Lorna said, eyes fixed on the incline. "It's probably just someone's deck with a coffee can." I remember the road felt tighter than it looked. Narrow, winding, chewing up the tires with loose stone. There was no railing, just a steep drop on the passenger side and tree trunks close enough to scrape the mirrors if you weren't careful. I sat in the back, pressed up against a cooler that kept jabbing my ribs every time we hit a rut. The light changed as we climbed, filtered strangely through the thick canopy. It started to feel less like daylight and more like we were underneath something, like entering the crawl space of the world. After about 5 minutes, the trees suddenly broke open into a clearing. The overlook was wide, flat, and completely unguarded. No fences, no signs, just the kind of view that makes you go quiet. You could see a dozen ridgelines stretching out like waves, gentle and blue and endless. But none of us were looking at the view. There was a shack, if you can call it that. It looked like someone had tried to rebuild a memory of a building without bothering with right angles. The wood was warped, sun-bleached, and slanted like it had grown that way. In front of it, someone had set up a folding table with a dented Folgers can on top. A Sharpie label read, "Offering." Behind it, a man sat in a plastic chair. He wore a faded camo vest over a flannel, and he had the stillness of someone waiting for nothing. He didn't move when we parked. Didn't wave, just sat there, watching. We climbed out, stretching our legs, still not sure what we'd found. Then he spoke. "You come to see the line?" His voice didn't echo, it was flat, like it fell straight to the ground. Lorna turned to him. "What line?" "The ridge line," he said. "Most folks think they're looking at land, but that's not what it is." He didn't look at any of us, just her. We walked to the edge, curious now. The horizon was off. That's the only way I can put it. The mountains were too even, too spaced. You could line them up with a ruler. And when you blinked, just briefly, they seemed to shift. Like something about their shape was trying to reset itself. "That one was closer a second ago," I said, pointing. Aaron leaned forward. "No, seriously. Look at the ridge to the left. It's taller now. It wasn't like that." We stared harder. Nothing changed when we looked directly, but every time we glanced away, then back, Something had moved. The peaks didn't stay still. The entire skyline breathed. Lorna squinted at it, then whispered something under her breath. She said it again. Then, once more. Then walked back to the table and placed a 5 in the can. The man didn't look down. He just said, "Don't go back the way you came." That was it. She nodded, turned, and got back in the car. We followed. No one argued. There was a path that curled behind the shack, a narrow dirt lane that looked like it hadn't been driven in years, maybe an old fire road. She took it without hesitation, and we climbed again. The air changed quickly. It got heavy, not hot, just thick, like it was pressing down on us. The road forked, then forked again. There were no signs, no tracks, no sounds except the crunch of gravel. And we weren't going downhill anymore. The trees were denser, lower. The sky had vanished entirely. Lorna kept checking the mirrors. At one point, she muttered, "That boulder's been on the right 3 times now." The GPS was frozen. No signal, no location, just a blank grid. That's when things started altering. The rubber seals around the window switches were sagging, softened. Erin touched hers and pulled her hand back. It felt sticky, like it had been left on a dashboard in August. Then she picked up her phone. It was lit, but blank, not black. Just an empty glow, no icons, no battery indicator, no time. I checked mine, same thing, lit but dead. Lorna didn't say anything. She kept driving until the path was just tall grass and brush. Then she stopped and killed the engine. We all sat in silence. She got out and popped the hood. I followed. The engine belts were warped, brittle, cracked like someone had baked them. But the block itself was barely warm, like we hadn't gone anywhere. She stared at it, then said, "I think it marked us." "What does that mean?" I asked. She didn't answer, just closed the hood and got back in the car. She reversed. Slowly, carefully. For nearly an hour we moved backward, inch by inch, no one speaking. At every fork, she made a new choice. Left, then right, then left again. We passed the same tree 3 times. Then we passed a blue nylon jacket hanging from a branch. Erin let out a noise that wasn't quite a scream. "That's mine," she said. "I lost that in Asheville, at camp, 3 years ago." None of us touched it. Later, we passed a stone sign that said, "Andy Ridge School, 1909. But there was no school, just the stone base and a patch of overgrown earth. It took 4 hours to find pavement again. As soon as the tires hit real road, everything came back. Phone signals, GPS, clock displays. The Suburban looked normal, except the seatbelts were frayed, badly, like they'd been chewed or aged. 30 years. We pulled into a diner at the edge of some town none of us could name. The waitress took one look at us and said, "Y'all look hollow." Lorna gave her a small smile and ordered coffee. None of us really talked, not then. But before we left, she opened the trunk and pulled out a plastic grocery bag. Inside was Erin's jacket, folded neatly. No one had brought it in. I asked how it got there. She said, "Some places give things back, but they ask for something else." We didn't stop again. We drove straight through 2 states without turning on music. The ukulele stayed silent, the sketch pads untouched. We've never spoken about it again. I used to think I had a pretty high threshold for creepy, but I learned fast during that road trip through the Appalachian backwoods. The plan felt spontaneous. 3 days, tops, my sister and I tagging along with Mom to visit cousins in rural Virginia. Barely knew them, barely planned. Mom just had this strong feeling it mattered. So we shoved snacks, a paper map, and our optimism into her old SUV and ignored the no service on our phones. Early on, nothing happened. Just highways and easy conversation. Then the high-speed lanes vanished and the road turned narrow, twisting into hills that closed in like walls. Sunlight couldn't punch through the dense canopy. No mile markers, no billboards. Just us, the tires on pavement, and a growing sense that we might vanish into something ancient. Mom got quieter. She kept gripping the wheel tighter, eyes flicking toward the shadows of trees. Then she said it outright. "It feels like something's following us," in a deadpan voice. Later, she brushed her shoulder. "Like a finger, just once," she said, like she was reciting a grocery list. We convinced ourselves she was just overtired. That night, the motel was carved into a hill. One hallway, flickering fluorescent lights, and carpet sticky with a strange sweetness. At 2:17, Mom jerked upright and screamed. She said something pressed her ankles. Steady weight until she kicked and it vanished. She ran around searching barefoot, under the beds, behind the curtains, even in closets. All empty. We sat up the rest of the night wide-eyed. Next morning, we pulled into a forest-surrounded gas station. One pump, one dusty window, one silent man inside. Mom went in to ask directions. My sister and I loosened our stiff legs. I circled the building and suddenly heard loud, heavy footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate. I froze. They stopped. I stared at the shingles for a long time. No sound after that. But I didn't walk away quick enough. The towns we passed looked abandoned. A fallen church with no windows, a general store missing its door, a schoolhouse cracking in half. We asked locals for help and always heard, "Just keep heading down." But every time the road led deeper into emptiness. At one porchless church, I stared too long and felt a pressure behind my eyes, as if someone were looking through me. Later that day, we found another motel, this one cheaper, far worse. Pipes thumped in a pattern, 3 taps, silence, 3 taps. My sister shrugged it off, but when I lay down, I heard metal light clicking under the bed. Quiet, precise. No vents nearby, no heaters, nothing mechanical. I yanked the sheet tight, and then I saw it. An outline next to me. Still. The shape of a person too broad-shouldered for a shadow. I yanked the sheet away, and nothing was there. But I felt hot breath on the back of my neck, then a whisper right beside my ear. "Play." I held still. Whispers of old prayers tumbled out of me, snapshots of phrases from childhood. "Deliver us, lead us not," I whispered. "Please be quiet." And for a moment, it was. The following day, we stopped at a vista. Mom and sister disappeared to the restroom. I leaned against the car trunk and heard crunching footsteps behind me. Slow and heavy. I turned. Nothing. I said softly, "Please, leave us alone." The air felt different. I swear, something that had been standing there simply slipped away. At the cousin's cabin that night, it felt almost normal. A single large room, a basement, woods pressing in. Leo, my boyfriend, joined us late. He rolled in with a duffel bag and said, "Felt like something was trailing me up the driveway." We laughed sharply. No one really meant it. Later, upstairs chores done, Leo and I were working in the basement. Footsteps sounded at the front door. Then Mom's voice, Alex's voice, calling us. We shot upstairs. No lights, doors locked, empty yard, no car, just silence. Leo slept on the couch. Next morning, he told me he heard a ball bouncing in the kitchen, rolling down the stairs, then it stopped and rolled again, always just around the corner. We don't own a ball. That night, Mom stared at the back of the house. She heard a baby crying in the woods behind us, thin, distant, constant. I remember the shot of cold down my spine. She stood by the door, waiting. I grabbed her arm to pull her away. Next morning, she made breakfast. Pot simmered, lid rattled. And then it shot up so hard it slammed the ceiling. It hung there for a moment, then crashed down, cracked tile. The stove wasn't on. Couple of days later, we headed out for supplies. I forgot my phone upstairs charging. Leo offered to go back for it. He emerged pale, shaking. "Something grabbed my leg," he said. Not a hand. Cold. It wrapped around me. He refused to go back. I got it myself. Final night, no motels available. We parked at a 24-hour truck stop under a flickering light. Around 3 a.m., my sister whispered, "Don't look out the window." Naturally, I did. There it was, a figure beyond the light's edge. Tall, draped in loose cloth. Beside it floated a white orb, glowing like some eerie lantern. They stood motionless, watching. I blinked. Still there. After what felt endless, I looked again. Gone. When we got home, our cat was gone. No window open, no collar in the yard. Gone. Dad never heard a whisper or a click. Never saw footsteps. But once he woke to find a tea light burning inches from his face. He always blows them out before bed. That night, he thought he had. At 4 a.m., it was lit again. We told a friend who put us in touch with a medium. He walked through the house and said 5 spirits were attached to us. A child, an old woman, a couple, and an angry man. He handed over a glass candle with a black cross. Told us to light it where we felt watched. We lit it in the SUV at the base of that mountain road. The flame bent sideways. The glass clicked, as if alive. We spoke clearly. This place isn't yours anymore. You don't come with us. It's time. Everything stopped after that. I left for school a month later. I've never driven that road again. I sleep with lights on, everywhere. Always check back seats before locking the car. Never stop in Appalachia after dark. I'd taken 2 weeks off work. No real reason, just that restless sort of itch that makes you want to disappear into the woods for a while and not answer emails. I loaded up my Forester with all the usual gear: tent, stove, water filter, first aid kit, everything. The plan was to drive a winding, mostly aimless route from Hollow Creek to Redbury, taking whatever side roads looked interesting and hiking trails that barely showed up on maps. I had no reservations, no set agenda, just a vague idea of moving northeast through the mountains, camping where I could, and avoiding cities altogether. I've done a dozen of these kinds of trips before, always solo. I like the quiet. And until this one, nothing weird had ever happened. At worst, I've had flat tires or unexpected rain. This time, though, I wanted something a little more off the radar, something people didn't post Instagram reels about. So I started combing through old hiking forums and obscure subreddits, looking for the kind of routes that don't get mentioned in guidebooks. That's how I found it. It was a thread from about 5 years ago. Not much activity. One post stood out, titled "Scenic but Sketchy." The guy who wrote it used a username I couldn't place, like a random string of words and numbers. No profile picture, no other posts. But the directions, they didn't feel fake. It wasn't some story, it was a list of turn-by-turn instructions with notes like, "Third left after the school with the boarded windows. Look for a mailbox painted blue. No house nearby. And finally, if you see the boy in the road twice, turn back. You missed it." That last line felt like a joke, but something about the detail, the tone, it just stuck with me. I screenshotted it, figured maybe I'd check it out if I had time. 3 days into the trip, I did. I'd just come down through Lantern Ridge and was heading toward an unmarked service road when I decided to follow the scenic but sketchy route. I pulled over, reread the steps, and turned off the main road. Gravel crunched under the tires. The air already felt different. At first, it was just odd but explainable stuff. A collapsed motel draped in kudzu, a church with all the windows bricked from the inside. I stopped to take a picture of that one, but the photo came out blurry. I checked the lens, wiped it, tried again. Same result. I remember thinking, okay, that's weird, but not weird enough to turn around. The last step on the forum was a sharp left past a green silo. I found it, made the turn, and maybe a minute later, my GPS froze. Not the usual spinning wheel. The whole screen just locked, then turned black. A few seconds later, in red letters, "Recalibrating." I waited, expecting it to restart. It didn't. The word kept flashing. I turned it off, back on, nothing. Same screen. I've never seen that message again, before or since. Still, I figured I'd just backtrack if things got too sketchy. But when I looked behind me, the road didn't look familiar anymore. The curves were sharper, the trees were closer, almost like they'd leaned in behind me. Even the light looked dimmer, and it wasn't near sunset. Then the gravel changed. I noticed it slowly. It had this violet tint to it, like bruised stone. No idea what kind of rock that was. I kept going, more curious than nervous at that point. Eventually, I passed a gutted truck. No tires, hood ripped off, cab rusted through. Next to it was a pile of antlers, at least 30, maybe more, stacked up neatly like someone was storing firewood. There was also a blue mailbox, just like the post said. No house in sight. I didn't stop. Then I saw the man. He was standing right in the middle of the road, next to a freshly killed deer. He wore faded overalls and was holding a funnel in one hand, like he'd been filling something or was about to. His face was streaked with gray, like he'd rubbed ash all over it, and in his other hand was a crumpled paper map. A pickup truck idled behind him, engine humming like it had just been started. Facing me, I slowed down, expecting him to wave, say something, maybe ask for help, but he didn't look up. He didn't even move, just stood there, staring at the funnel like he couldn't remember what it was. I drove around him slowly, careful not to hit the deer. I didn't look back. From there, the road narrowed. The branches were so close, they scraped the car. My mirrors brushed leaves. I turned off the music because it felt wrong to hear anything man-made. That's when the fog started, not regular fog. This came in low, sliding out from the woods, like it was being pushed by something. Dense, wet, too heavy for the breeze to move. It clung to the road in thick waves. Up ahead, I saw a bus stop. Just an old bench with a rusted overhang. A girl was sitting there. She had her knees pulled up, face buried in her arms, red dress soaked through. I slowed, thinking maybe she was hurt. As I passed, she turned her head. Her eyes were wide, clouded over, her face pressed up to the glass like she'd been waiting for something to arrive that never did. She didn't blink. I didn't stop. That stretch of road lasted forever. No turns, no signs, just miles of that weird fog. My phone stayed dead. Then, finally, a break. Another car ahead. Same color, same shape. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I noticed the rear fender. Deep crescent-shaped dent, same place as mine. A long scratch that I'd put there backing into a cart corral months ago. I floored it. The car turned ahead of me. When I rounded the bend, it was gone. No sign of it. Just a wooden sign hanging from a chain-link fence. Retreat. A while later, the road forked. No signs, no pavement, just two dirt paths. I chose the one with fresher tire marks. That's when the gas light came on. I hadn't been paying attention. The tank was nearly empty. I coasted along, half panicking, until I saw a gas station ahead. Small, squat building with a rusted metal canopy. The sign on the door said closed Sunday. It was Tuesday, but the lights were on. I stepped out. The air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I walked up to the glass. Everything inside was pristine, not clean, untouched. The shelves were stocked like it was the first day of opening. A man stood behind the counter, hand on the register, motionless. He didn't look at me when I knocked. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. I backed away slowly and got back in the car. For whatever reason, I picked up my phone. I didn't expect anything, but the screen lit up. One message, no name, no number. You're nearly here. I dropped it in the seat and didn't touch it again. A few minutes later, I passed through a rusted gate. Beyond it, the road climbed steeply. At the top was a clearing, and in the middle of that clearing was my car. Same dents, same gear in the back, engine running, driver's door open like I'd just stepped out. I slammed the brakes, I blinked, and it was gone. No skid marks, no sound, just gone. I sat there, frozen, hands white on the wheel. Then I threw the car in reverse and backed down the hill until I hit the gate. I turned around and followed the road until I finally saw a real highway sign. Paved asphalt. Town name I knew. I made it to a station in Leston Hollow. Filled up with shaking hands, I sat in the car for a long time. When I finally checked the hiking forum again, the post was gone. User deleted. No cache, no archive. Like it was never there. I still do road trips, but only with someone else in the passenger seat. And I never go near that part of the range. I was 31 when we took a detour off Route 19. Colton was driving like he always did. Elbow out the window, sunglasses on even though the sun was barely up. Like he thought he was auditioning for a road trip movie. We'd left Pittsburgh early that morning, aiming for Asheville. No reservations, no real timeline. Just the idea of a 2-day drive with plenty of stops along the way. Maybe some antique shops. A waterfall or two if we felt like hiking. It was supposed to be low stress, but Colton didn't believe in supposed to. Plans were suggestions to him. At some point that afternoon, he turned to me and said, "You ever wonder what the old roads know that the new ones forgot?" I laughed. "That's what you're going with?" He just grinned. "Trust me, they're better." He swerved off the highway just outside a town called Elliston. I remember seeing a closed-down diner and a half-collapsed barn right before we left the main road. I didn't object. I figured we had time and maybe we'd stumble onto something cool. A local festival, maybe a weird roadside attraction. Worst case, we hit a dead end and turned back. A few miles in, the GPS stopped responding, just froze, like it had lost its mind. We tried a couple of different apps, but it was the same deal. No service, no map updates, just blank screens. I kept an eye on the trees as they got thicker and closer to the edge of the road. Pines, mostly. The sun started cutting through in thin strips, which made the whole road feel like we were driving through the ribs of something alive. Then the road narrowed. Gravel first, then patchy dirt. We bumped along for another half-mile before I saw the sign. Burned into a crooked plank of wood nailed to a bent metal post. Nellis Ridge. The name didn't mean anything to me, but Colton immediately sat up straighter. "This is it," he said, tapping the sign like it was proof of something. "My uncle used to talk about this place." "Used to?" "Yeah," he said, a little quieter, "before the dementia. But he always came back to this story. Said there was a town back here, real hidden. Said they buried the roads to keep outsiders out. It sounded like the kind of thing you'd make up to scare kids at a campfire. Still, I couldn't help but feel curious, and maybe a little uneasy. The road got rougher after that. Not like potholes, more like it didn't want to be driven on. The van bounced around and the trees pressed in even tighter. It felt less like we were driving and more like we were being funneled. Then the van dipped. No noise, no warning, just a soft drop, like the ground underneath one of the front wheels had given up. Colton swore and pulled us to the side. We both got out. The tire wasn't popped, wasn't muddy, but it had sunk into the dirt, not a little bit, like 6 inches deep, cleanly, like someone had cut a hole and set the wheel inside. The ground around it was dry and cracked, like it hadn't seen rain in years. Colton tried reversing. Nothing, no spin, no noise, just stuck. I started scanning the woods for something we could use, flat stones, fallen branches, anything to wedge under the tire. That's when I spotted the fence. Low and rusted, mostly swallowed by ivy, maybe 15 yards off the road. Past it was a clearing, not just trees, rows. Neat rows of stone markers. I stepped toward it, more curious than cautious. The place looked old, but it wasn't overgrown. The grass was short, the stones weren't tipped or cracked, and right in the center was this table. Wooden, wide, worn, but standing solid. Around it was a perfect circle of mason jars. When Colton caught up, he stared at them the same way I was. "What is this?" We stepped over the sagging wire. The jars were sealed with deep red wax, thick like candle drippings. Each one had something inside: a bundle of feathers, a rolled scrap of cloth, coins, a broken wristwatch floating in dark, syrupy liquid. One had a row of tiny teeth. The longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The air wasn't colder exactly, but it was heavier, like it was waiting. The gravestones didn't have names, just dates. Some went back to the mid-1800s. One marker stood out, bigger, smoother. The carving on it read April 3rd, 1912. We kept them company. Now they returned the favor. Coltan read it aloud, then stared back at the jars. "These aren't for the dead," he said. "They're for the living." I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't want to ask. We turned to go back to the van, and the road was gone. Gone. Not blocked, not hidden, just replaced. Where the van should have been was now a wall of trees. Thick trunks, knotted branches, no break. Coltan walked straight into the brush, pushing at it. Nothing budged, like the forest was welded shut. "This isn't how we came in," he kept saying. We didn't turn. I checked my phone again, still dead. I opened the compass app out of habit. The needle spun in place, then locked in the wrong direction. Then we heard it, footsteps, slow, rhythmic, crunching through the leaves like someone walking barefoot on purpose. Not animals, not random, measured. We spun around. I said, "We need to move." So we did. We started walking, hugging the tree line, looking for anything, another road, a break, a trail, but the woods just kept stretching. After maybe 20 minutes, we stumbled into another clearing, another fence, another table, another circle of jars. But these weren't like the others. These were personal. One held hair. One had half of a burned photo. Another had a rusted spoon and what looked like a lock of braided string. And one jar had fabric, black with a white print on it. I stared at it. Coltan's t-shirt. The sleeve had ripped the day before when we loaded the cooler into the van. He reached for it. The wax cracked and the woods exhaled, like something big had been holding its breath. Then came the voice right behind us. "You came late this year." I turned. No one. Coltan didn't flinch. He just stood there, frozen, staring at the jar. I grabbed his wrist, hard. "We have to go, right now." He moved like his bones didn't want to bend, but he followed when I pulled. We ran. I had no plan, no direction, just away. The woods twisted around us, like they were folding in on themselves. Every time I thought we'd gotten somewhere, we circled back. We passed the same tree 3 times. Dead pine, spiral carved deep into the bark. We weren't walking, we were being spun. Then we hit water, a stream wide and fast, too wide to cross without risking one of us slipping. And across it, another clearing, another fence, another circle of jars. We hadn't escaped, we'd been placed. That's when Coltan spoke again, whispering like someone might hear. He made jars. Said they kept her brothers safe when they went into the mines. Said if they got lost down there, she could call them back. I turned to him. "Who told you that?" "My uncle," he said. "Same one who talked about this place. Said the whole ridge collapsed in the 20s, but not from digging. Said it folded, like a shirt pocket turned inside out, around her." I asked, "Who is she?" He looked past me. I turned. She was standing at the table. Not walking, not moving. Just there, a woman, or the shape of one. Long gray dress, no face I could make out. Arms limp at her sides. She lifted a hand, and then she was 10 feet closer. I wait to blink again. I grabbed Coltan and ran, no idea where. I didn't care. At some point, the tree snapped back into place, like a curtain dropping. And there it was, the road and the van, exactly as we left it. We didn't speak. I pulled him past it, up the incline as fast as he could move. At the top of the hill, we saw a sign half swallowed by vines, Route 19, 6 miles. We didn't stop walking until we hit the highway, flagged down a state trooper who looked at us like we were the ones who'd been buried. They found the van, same place. Tire wasn't even stuck anymore. But the roads leading to that spot, none of them matched what we remembered. I was 24 when I left town, packed my car one morning and started driving. I didn't really know where I was going, just knew I couldn't stay where I was. That quiet desperation hits different after a breakup, especially one that leaves everything in your apartment smelling like someone else. Even my shampoo felt like a reminder. I told work I needed a week. They didn't ask questions. They knew I was unraveling a little, and honestly, I think they were relieved to get me out of the office for a bit. I tossed some clothes in a duffel, downloaded a couple podcasts I probably wouldn't listen to, and started driving south. No plan. Just the vague idea that the Appalachians might be far enough to make me feel like I'd gone somewhere older and quieter. By the third day, I'd crossed into eastern Kentucky. My back was killing me from the hours in the car, and I was running low on gas. I wasn't even near a real town when I saw it. A weathered green sign with flaking paint that read Buckridge Motor Court. The name sounded like it hadn't been updated since the 60s. It pointed toward a side road that curved away from the highway and vanished into a dense line of trees. It looked like the kind of place you pass without thinking, but something about it, maybe just exhaustion, made me slow down and turn in. The road was gravel and narrow, with branches that hung low enough to scrape the top of my car. When it opened up, the motel appeared suddenly, like it had been waiting just out of sight. 10 rooms, maybe 12, arranged in a horseshoe around a patch of gravel that had probably been a courtyard once. The rooms were single-story, flat-roofed, each with its own crooked wooden door and peeling number. Room 3 was the only one with a porch light flickering. The office was a battered trailer, sitting to the right, with a warped plywood ramp nailed together like someone's weekend project. Inside, it smelled like dust and cheap coffee. A man sat behind a desk that looked like it belonged in a church basement. Scarred wood, stained doily, half a roll of duct tape holding one leg steady. He wore a red flannel shirt with sleeves too short for his arms, and he didn't look up when I walked in. He just gestured toward the guest book like this was a routine he hadn't changed in decades. There was no computer, no credit card machine, no ID check. I said I needed a room for the night, and he slid a brass key across the counter. The tag was wood, splintered around the edges with a faded 3 hand-painted on it. He didn't ask me to sign anything, just nodded and went back to whatever he was pretending to read. I walked across the gravel and let myself into room 3. It wasn't great, but I've stayed in worse. 2 beds, both with those stiff floral blankets you only ever see in places that rent rooms by the hour or by the month. There was an old TV mounted on a crooked bracket and a window unit in the back wall that whined like it was dying, but at least it blew cold air. I tossed my bag on the bed closest to the door, grabbed my wallet, and headed across the road to a gas station. It was the only other light I'd seen for miles. I picked up a pre-made sandwich, a bag of chips, and one of those giant bottled teas that always tastes a little like plastic. I was gone maybe 20 minutes. When I came back, the key wouldn't work. I checked the tag again. 3. I jiggled it, leaned my shoulder into the door. Still stuck. Then just as I was about to knock, the knob creaked and turned slightly in my hand. The door popped open a crack, like someone had just unlocked it from the inside. I stood there a second, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the AC and maybe some crickets in the trees. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Everything looked the same at first. The bag was right where I'd dropped it. The light above the sink still buzzed. But the bed by the window, something was off. The blanket had been pulled back at the top corner, just enough to look used. Like someone had lain down, rested a while, then left without straightening it. I hadn't touched that bed. I'd walked in earlier, dropped my stuff on the first one, and walked right back out. I stood there a long minute, staring between the two beds, trying to convince myself maybe it had always looked like that. Ate my sandwich sitting on the edge of the bed, TV flickering in front of me. Nothing good on, just static, a guy yelling on a church show, and some reruns of a sitcom I used to watch when I was a kid. I picked one and leaned back. Then I caught it in the mirror. It was small, just a flicker of movement in the reflection to the left of the TV. The bathroom door was open, and something had moved past it. I saw it. A blur, fast and silent. I turned so fast I knocked over the tea bottle. The bathroom was empty. The door, though, it was still swaying like it had been nudged. I stood up, walked over, and pushed it open. Nothing inside. I shut it again, waited. No breeze, no vibration, nothing that should have made it move. I left the bathroom light on and locked the room door. I didn't brush my teeth, didn't change clothes. I lay on top of the covers with the TV playing low and stared at the ceiling for hours. I left just after sunrise. Didn't stop at the office, just dropped the key in a rusted metal box screwed into the trailer door and drove until my gas light came on. That day I followed Route 421 up into the hills. The road was tight and twisted with steep drop-offs on one side and trees pressing in from the other. Sometimes I wouldn't see another car for 20 minutes. Just birds, trees, and a slow, creeping fog that clung to the branches like old webbing. Around noon, I pulled into a scenic overlook, one of those spots where you can step out and feel like the whole mountain range is laid out just for you. I stood by the railing, taking in the view, trying to shake off the night. Then I heard it, crunching gravel. Footsteps, soft and close. I turned, no one, but the footprints were there, 2 of them, bare feet. Darkened the gravel like they were soaked, and they hadn't come from anywhere. No trail leading up, no trail leading away. I didn't linger. That afternoon, I found a general store that looked like it had survived the Cold War. Cow skull nailed above the door, hand-painted signs, shelves that didn't match. The woman behind the counter looked like she'd been carved from tree bark. I asked if there were any decent places to stay ahead, trying to keep it casual. She scratched her arm and said, "Closest probable Buckridge." Felt my throat close up. "I stayed there," I said, trying to sound normal. "This morning." She looked confused. "Don't think so." I pulled out my phone, opened my map. Nothing. No pin, no history. It was like the place never existed. That night, I parked behind a small-town church and tried to sleep in the back seat. I didn't feel great about it, but it felt better than a motel. I cracked the window just enough to let air in, laid my jacket over my chest, and dozed off. Then, at 4:30 in the morning, there was a knock. Not loud, just 2 soft taps on the passenger side window, sharp and polite, like someone asking if I had a moment to talk. I sat up fast. Nothing there. Checked the side mirror. Then the other one. Still nothing. Then 2 more taps, this time behind me. Then again, driver's side, near the back. Soft, deliberate. It circled the car. I started the engine and turned on the headlights. The knocking stopped. In the rearview mirror, something caught my eye. On the seat behind me was a folded blanket. Faded green, motel style, neat and tucked, like it had been placed with care. It was the exact same blanket from the second bed in room 3, and hadn't brought it. I drove, didn't stop for hours. Didn't even look at the gas gauge until I saw sunlight breaking through the trees. We were about halfway through a week-long family road trip. Just me, my wife, our 3-year-old daughter, and my younger sister. All crammed into the van with a bunch of snacks and 0 patience for interstate traffic. I'd spent weeks putting the route together. Nothing on the highway. Just back roads through the Appalachian Mountains, tiny forgotten towns, and the kind of old diners where the menus are printed once and never again. I guess I just wanted my daughter to see a version of the world that wasn't on her tablet. Maybe even some real stars. Signal started to drop somewhere past Roan Mountain. GPS froze in the middle of a turn. One minute we were following directions, and the next we were on our own, not totally lost, just drifting. The road narrowed, curled like a ribbon into the hills. No signs, no other cars, just a whole lot of trees and the kind of silence that makes you check the rearview mirror a little more than usual. When the fuel light came on, I started to worry. We hadn't passed a town in hours. Then we saw it, an old wooden sign leaning against a split log at the side of the road, letters barely visible in the fading light. Cold Vein Hollow Cabins in Spring Water. Below that, a hand-painted arrow pointing downhill like it was giving us the only option left. The cabins look like something out of a photo album you find in an attic. Faded red paint, wood warped from rain and sun, chimneys built from stone that probably hadn't seen smoke in years. But the lights were on in the main office. The door creaked open. No one inside. Just a row of old keys hanging on pegs and a guest book cracked open on the counter. The thing looked like it had been there forever. Yellowed pages, ink faded almost gray. I flipped to the last entry. One sentence. Cottage 3 is clean. Don't disturb the old woman. We picked cottage 4 that first night. Uneventful, mostly. Our daughter passed out early, curled up tight after hours of being in the car. My sister stretched out on the couch. My wife and I were in bed, both still half reading, half processing the day. Just before midnight, I thought I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, right above us. I froze for a second, trying to remember if I'd seen stairs. I hadn't. There was no second floor. I decided it had to be pipes. Old places grown, no big deal. At 3:40 a.m., my sister shook me awake. Her voice was barely above a breath. She's talking to someone. We crept to the living room. My daughter was sitting cross-legged on the rug, totally still, whispering. The way kids whisper when they're deep into make-believe, focused, serious. She was staring into the corner of the room like she was listening to someone. Across from her, the rocking chair was moving, back and forth, slowly. Nobody was in it. I said her name. She turned and smiled at me like everything was normal. Then she frowned. She doesn't like when you talk over her, she said. The chair stopped, just like that. We walked her back to bed. She didn't resist. Didn't say another word, just tucked herself in. My wife looked pale. She told me she'd heard something the night before too, like someone humming or maybe speaking softly, but didn't want to bring it up. I told them both it was probably just imaginary play. Our daughter had seen a lot of people in a lot of strange places over the last few days. Kids latch onto weird things. 2 nights later, we were sleeping in the van. We'd stopped behind this tiny, peeling white clapboard church somewhere off a gravel road near a place called Buckhannon. It had been hours since we'd seen anything that looked like a hotel, and I wasn't risking another mystery cabin. We parked under a dead oak tree and tried to make the seats work. The van was dark, except for the dim orange glow from the dash clock. At some point past 2, I woke up and knew something was wrong. At first, I thought I was just sore from the way I'd twisted myself into the seat. But it was more than that. I couldn't move. Not like sleepy can't move. I mean completely frozen. Eyes wide open, arms locked to my sides, chest tight. I could feel my daughter's tiny form curled next to me. My wife's hand was resting on my chest, heavy and still. Everything else, paralyzed. And then I heard it, a breath slow and too close. In my left ear, inhale, then exhale. Then again, louder, closer. It wasn't my wife. The sound was wrong, too wet, too deliberate. It wasn't just breathing, it was performed, as if someone wanted me to hear it, to know they were inches from my face, and I couldn't stop them. The breath grew until it filled my entire head. I could feel it pressing against my eardrum like it was going to burst. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I could feel the scream sitting just below my throat, locked inside me. Then the sound vanished, snapped, like a string pulled too tight. I bolted upright, drenched in sweat. Everyone else was asleep. That's when I stopped pretending. Next morning, we pulled into a gas station that barely qualified as a building. One pump, a fridge full of expired soda, and a bored teenager behind the counter. I filled the tank. My daughter wandered toward the woods on the edge of the lot. I called out, but she didn't move. She was staring into the trees. Frozen. "She's there," she said. I walked over and knelt beside her. "Who's there?" She didn't blink. "The lady. She's not supposed to be on the road." That was it. I lost my patience. I looked straight into the trees and said loud and clear, "This is not your place, this is my family's trip. If you were ever alive, I'm giving you a chance to leave. You don't get to follow us. If I see you again, I'll bring someone who knows how to deal with you." The trees creaked. The air didn't move. Nothing rustled. I picked her up and we drove in silence. For a while after that, it was quiet, peaceful even. No strange conversations, no dreams, nothing out of place. We laughed more, slept better. I started to believe maybe that was it. Maybe I'd been firm enough, clear enough. Then came our last night in Kentucky. We'd found a small cabin near a still lake. Perfect mirror surface, no boats, no curtains on the windows. You could see every corner of the room reflected back at you. I didn't love that, but I was too tired to care. Our daughter went to bed early, without a fight. We sat on the porch for a while, just watching the water. Then the crying started. It was loud, raw, panicked. We ran to her room. She was pointing up, sobbing. "She's under the ceiling." She cried. I followed her gaze. Just an exposed beam overhead. Empty space. But she was terrified. "Tell her to go away," I said. She looked up, nodded, and said softly, "Go away." She calmed instantly. Rolled over like nothing had happened. I leaned in close to my wife and whispered, "We're leaving at first light." Then our daughter mumbled. She moved. I turned. "What?" "She's by the curtain now." She pointed behind us. To the window. I stood up. Steady voice, slow and firm. "You had your chance. You came back anyway. You don't get to scare my daughter again. Next time, I won't be the one who speaks to you." We left the light on. Gave her warm milk. She didn't wake up again. Tomorrow, we head home. I was 31 when it happened. We were taking what my dad liked to call the scenic route. He said it like it was a treat. I just wanted to get to Charleston and be done with it. A client of his had inherited some heavy, old industrial equipment, stuff from a quarry or mill no one really knew, and needed someone trustworthy to take a look before hiring a shipping company. My dad volunteered. Said he could use another pair of hands, but honestly, I think he just didn't want to drive through eastern Kentucky alone. So we flew into Lexington, rented a big white truck with a rattling tailgate, and planned to cut through the hills into West Virginia. No interstates, he insisted. "Highways are for people trying to get away from something," he said while adjusting the mirrors. "If you want to see something real, you stay on the ground." It sounded poetic, but I knew he just didn't like fast lanes. The first few hours were okay. The roads were tight and curved like they were designed by someone who had never seen a straight line. But they were mostly empty. We passed through tiny towns with single stop signs and buildings leaning like they were tired of standing. Some of them had names I forgot before we'd even made it past the last mailbox. Dad pointed out stuff constantly. Old churches, iron-colored creeks, barns that were somehow both collapsing and still in use. He loved the hills. Always had. Said they felt alive. I mostly stared at my phone, trying to load a map or get a text through. Nothing worked. The signal kept vanishing and coming back one bar at a time, like it was teasing me. Eventually, I gave up and watched the trees blur by. It was around mid-afternoon when things started to shift. At first, it was just subtle stuff. The air felt denser. The road narrowed until it barely felt paved. The trees got taller, thicker, darker. My ears started popping a little, like we were climbing, even though the dashboard didn't show much elevation change. Then the GPS in the truck started spinning in slow circles, like it had lost its grip on the world. My phone was dead, no service, nothing. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:17. About 20 minutes later, I looked again. Still 2:17. I pointed it out to my dad. He tapped his watch, frowned, then turned it toward me. It also read 2:17. We didn't talk much after that. Then we hit the fork in the road. There was this hand-carved wooden sign nailed to a post, almost hidden behind a mess of vines. The letters were rough, weather-warped and dark, like they'd soaked in years of rain. Coal Hollow. No arrows. No mile count. Just those two words. The gravel road it pointed to didn't show up on the GPS. Not that the GPS was even working anymore. But my dad took the turn without hesitation. That's what the guy texted. He said, "Coal Hollow cuts through, saves time." We bumped along for a while. The gravel got rough, uneven. The trees started closing in. There wasn't even enough room for another car to pass if one came the other way, but none did. We hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, not even parked in driveways. It got so quiet that the only sound was the tires crunching over loose rock. No birds, no bugs, no wind, just that constant rolling under us. That's when we saw the kid. He was lying right in the middle of the road, arms at his sides, shirtless, skin gray with dust. Maybe 8 or 9 years old, no shoes, no backpack, just shorts and stillness. My dad braked hard. The truck jolted to a stop a few feet from him. We couldn't go around. On the right, the land dropped off in a sharp slope. On the left, the trees were pressed in so tight it felt like a wall. The kid didn't move. Didn't even twitch. I looked at my dad, he looked at the kid, then the woods moved. 5 men stepped out from between the trees, slow and silent. 2 on the left, 3 on the right. They walked like they knew exactly where to go. One had a shotgun slung over his shoulder. Another held a knife that looked handmade, maybe a carved bone handle, maybe something worse. Their clothes were stained, layered and heavy like they hadn't been washed in years. Their eyes were steady. Their faces were blank, not angry, not threatening, just focused. They didn't yell, didn't say anything. They just came toward the truck. One walked straight up to my window and tapped it once with his knuckle, just once. "You're gonna drive us to the old town," he said. No questions, no options. Then they started opening the doors. The kid, who had been lying there like a corpse, stood up without help. No limp, no blood. He smiled and climbed into the back seat. That grin, something about it felt wrong. His 2 front teeth were too small, too neat, like they didn't quite fit his face. 2 more climbed in beside him, calm as anything. The shotgun guy slid into the passenger seat next to me. The last one waited outside until we started rolling, then climbed into the truck bed, like this was normal. My dad didn't speak, didn't argue, just shifted into drive. The man beside me started giving directions, not normal ones, no street names, no distances. "Turn at the bent pole," he said. "Go past the yellow mailbox, then right." Everything was described by things you'd only notice if you'd been there 100 times. Broken signs, dented trash cans, an old couch left to rot by the road. And somehow, those things were always there. At some point, I realized we weren't climbing or descending anymore. The road just leveled out, stayed flat, like we were stuck in one long, unchanging stretch of forest that didn't follow the rules of the real world anymore. I asked, barely above a whisper, "Where are we going?" He turned just slightly toward me. "To where they buried the town," he said. "But it ain't dead." And that was it. No follow-up. He didn't say another word the rest of the drive. Eventually, we reached what looked like a clearing, though the trees never really pulled back. The road just ended. Out of nowhere, there it was, Harlow's Edge. At least that's what the cracked stone markers said. I'd never heard of it. No signs, no mention on any map I'd ever seen. Ruins everywhere. A collapsed church. burnt-out homes overtaken by vines, a rusted water tower leaning like it was bowing to something. The man in the truck bed hopped down. The kid followed, carrying a small duffel bag. I hadn't even noticed it before. Shotgun guy didn't move at first, just turned to my dad and said, "Wait here." Then he got out and went with them into what looked like an old general store. The front windows were shattered, the roof half missing. I told my dad, we should go, right now. He didn't argue, but he didn't move either. When I asked why, he just said, "I don't think we're supposed to yet." They were inside a while, long enough that the silence started feeling like part of the landscape. When they came back, the kid was holding a metal lunchbox. It looked brand new. No scratches, no dust, just smooth and silver, like it had been made that morning. They climbed back in. "Take us to the crossing," Shotgun Man said. We didn't turn around, just drove forward even though there hadn't been a road there before. But now there was. Eventually, we came to a narrow bridge over a dead train track. That's where they got out. The man took the lunchbox from the kid and looked at my dad. "Don't come back here," he said. Then the kid stepped forward, looked at me, and said, "They don't want to be found." And they walked into the trees and vanished. We sat there a long time. Eventually, we must have driven back. I don't remember the turns, I don't remember the road widening or the trees letting go, but eventually we were near the highway and our phones lit up again. At the next gas station, my dad went to the restroom. When he came out, he pulled up his shirt and showed me his shoulder. 5 bruises, finger-shaped, too big to be from a child. He hadn't been touched. Not that I'd seen. A week later, back home, I opened the glove box looking for a receipt. The lunchbox was there. We hadn't taken it, we hadn't seen it since the bridge, but there it was. Inside, a loop of black hair tied with red thread. A faded photo of 6 people standing in a field. 3 kids, 3 adults, all staring straight at the camera. No smiles, no life in their eyes, and a single baby tooth, small and perfect, sitting right in the center. We left it under the old tree near the edge of the yard, just set it there and walked away. The drive from Charleston to Knoxville isn't anything remarkable. Just a long stretch of highway with a few hills, some forgettable exits, and enough gas stations with bad coffee to keep your eyelids from collapsing. I'd done it before. Twice, actually. And both times had gone off without a hitch. So I didn't think twice when I threw my duffel in the back seat, topped off the tank, and hit the road just after noon. The GPS lit up, I picked a podcast, and that was that. I didn't bother checking the route. No reason to. I'd driven it, trusted it. It's not like Google suddenly forgets where Tennessee is. About 2 hours in, somewhere past Beckley, the signal cut out. Not dropped, cut 1 second. Music was playing, the little map, arrow crawling along like usual, then just dead silence. No static, no buffer, just gone. I looked at the screen. Blank. No data. The icon had frozen somewhere in a patch of green nothing. Still, I didn't panic. Mountain roads eat signals for breakfast. It happens. You lose GPS for a mile, maybe 2, then it comes back and acts like nothing happened. I figured I'd drive a few more minutes, pop out of the valley, and it'd reconnect. Instead, the road got weird. Not suddenly, gradually. The kind of thing you don't notice until you're squinting at it, wondering when it stopped looking normal. The shoulder disappeared first. Just a slow fade into gravel and leaves. Then the painted lines. Center stripe. Edge markings. Those started to break up. Before long, I was riding a narrow, twisting ribbon of cracked pavement with nothing but trees pressing in tight on either side. I figured maybe I'd missed a turn near Oak Hill. That could happen. It didn't seem right, but I'd been distracted fiddling with the Bluetooth connection. Still, there hadn't been any obvious forks, just a gentle bend that seemed to keep going. Tighter than I remembered, curling down into darker woods. Then the road dipped. Really dipped, like I was sliding into some forgotten gorge. No houses, no cars, just the kind of wilderness you usually see from a hiking trail, not a driver's seat. The weird part? I didn't remember passing any signs. No towns, no intersections, nothing that explained how I ended up there. I almost turned around. Then, around a tight corner, I saw it. A gas station, slumped against the hillside like it had been dropped there decades ago and never got back up. One lonely pump out front, rusted to hell. The canopy above it sagged to one side, held up by what looked like two different sized poles. The windows were blacked out, and I couldn't tell if it was tinted glass or just filth. The sign above the door said Gaddis in faded, flaking paint. I pulled in. I didn't need gas. The gauge still sat above half. I just needed to stop moving, figure out where I was, maybe ask directions. If anyone was even inside. The pump was ancient, one of those old mechanical dials that clicked and spun when gas flowed. Except this one looked permanently frozen. No card reader, no keypad, just rust. I walked up to the store. The door creaked, but didn't trigger a bell. There was a dusty hook where the bell should have been, just swaying slightly. The inside felt wrong, not scary, just stagnant, like the place had been sealed off and time forgot about it. The air was weirdly warm, thick almost. Nothing on the shelves had price tags. Some of the boxes were so sun-bleached I couldn't read them. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. I took another step in, and that's when he appeared. A man stepped out from behind a shelf. No sound, no warning, just there. His clothes looked like something out of an old catalog. Tan jacket zipped all the way up, faded jeans, plain black baseball cap with no logo. The kind of outfit that could belong to 100 different people, yet somehow didn't feel like it belonged to anyone at all. His eyes didn't land on me. Not fully. They drifted just slightly off, like I was standing an inch to the left of where he expected. "You lost?" he asked, voice flat and even. I said, "Yeah, I was headed to Knoxville and must have taken a wrong turn." He nodded once and gestured vaguely toward the road behind me. "Don't take the ridge road," he said. Now here's the thing, I hadn't mentioned a ridge. I asked him how to get back on track. He didn't give directions in any normal way. No route numbers, no highway names, just look for the split tree, take a left there. "What does it look like?" I asked. He gave me a look like I'd asked what color the sky was. "You'll know," that's all he said. Back in the car, I sat there a moment, debating whether to listen. Part of me wanted to turn around, get back to a main road, retrace every step. But another part, stubborn, tired, maybe just a little too curious, decided to drive ahead. I found the tree. He was right. There was no mistaking it. It stood half on the shoulder, roots straddling the ditch like claws. The trunk had split open from top to bottom, as if something had burst out of it. Black scorch marks crawled up the bark, but somehow the branches were full, green, alive. It didn't make sense. I took the left. The road narrowed even more. It dipped again, then again. Old houses appeared here and there, half-rotted cabins, broken trailers, front porches clinging to one last nail. One had "no trespassing" scrawled directly across the siding in what looked like spray paint over bullet holes. I passed a church with boarded-up windows and deep gashes in the door, like something had tried to rip it off its hinges. But I kept driving. I told myself this was just rural country, isolated, maybe a little rougher than I was used to. Nothing more. Then came the signs, not road signs. These were pieces of wood nailed to trees, some painted, some written with marker or charcoal. A few had Bible verses. One just said, "Turn back." Another was written in a language I couldn't place. The last one was just a red handprint with a nail punched straight through the palm. I didn't stop to look closer. Eventually the pavement came back, but it wasn't right. The paint was crooked, hand done. The lines were uneven, like someone tried to recreate a real road from memory and didn't quite get it right. Then I saw the truck, a white pickup, parked on the side. No plates, no markings, just a dirty tarp tied down over the bed. No one inside. 5 minutes later, I passed it again. Same dent, same crack in the taillight, same spot of flattened grass. I pulled over, turned off the car, sat still. The woods were dense, but not quiet. I heard movement, something stepping through dry leaves. Quick, light, stopping and starting like it didn't want to be heard but didn't quite care enough to hide completely. Then I caught it in the rearview mirror, a face just barely visible, not angry, not smiling, just watching. I turned around, nothing there. I didn't wait. Started the engine, got moving again, didn't care where it led. The road wound tighter, trees pulled closer. The light was fading fast. I checked the fuel, blinking red. I hadn't gone far enough for that. Then I saw the sign, crooked wooden board, nailed to a splintered post. Welcome back, that's all it said. Hadn't been there before. No turns, no forks. The road hadn't looped, but the truck showed up again. Same dents, same tarp. This time it was on the other side of the road. I didn't stop. Eventually the force pulled away. The road widened, streetlights blinked on ahead, and just like that, I was out. A normal gas station stood at the edge of the road. Bright, clean, 2 working trucks parked at the pumps. Actual logos, real plates. I pulled in, nearly shaking. Inside, the guy at the register looked up, then did a double take. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. I told him I came through a split tree on a ridge road. He went still. "There's no road out there anymore," he said. "Washed out a long time ago." I filled up, drove straight to Knoxville, no detours, no stops. When I got there, I checked the mileage. I'd burned through more than I should have, at least half a tank extra. And I was nearly 2 hours late. No missed calls, no texts. No one noticed. I've searched maps, forums, satellite images. Nothing. No Gaddis, no Ridge Road, no trace of any of it. Now I take the long way, every single time.